Tim Linder here. Let's talk about the QuickMask mode. So inside of Photoshop, we know that we can make selections with our selection tool, and that designates what is and isn't selected, right? So if I get my elliptical marquee tool and I make a selection here, and I say, oh, this is what's inside of here is selected. Or if I were to go to select inverse, I can say, oh, what's outside is selected. And if I were to fill that with maybe a white color, I'm gonna hit default colors and then swap that and choose edit, fill, or option delete. I can fill this with my foreground color and fill that with white. Now I've got this selection that's filled with white, right? I'm going to undo that. Now, one of the problems with a selection like this is that, let's say that I wanted to make a really soft selection around the edge. So I would go to select, modify, feather, and make a really soft selection. So 60 pixel soft selection. I'll hit OK, and nothing changed. It didn't look any different. But if I choose edit fill with my foreground color, which is white, boy, that looks a lot different. Had a nice soft selection. I couldn't really tell that that was soft with the marching ants, right? I didn't really notice that that selection was soft. So I'm going to undo a couple times and go back. So the nice thing about the QuickMask is that, well, one of the nice things is that it visualizes what's selected and what isn't in this sort of mask, and you can make the color whatever you want. So what is selected doesn't have a mask on it, and what is has a mask. And right now it's set to green. I think by default, if I double click on it, mine was set to green. But by default, I think it's a red mask that you would see there. So this is probably what you're going to see. It's a red mask. The color doesn't matter. I had just changed it to green probably because I was selecting something that was red before, and I didn't want a red mask selecting something that was red. It would just confuse me, so I changed the color. But you could double click and change that default color, but by default it's red. And I can tell what is and isn't selected by what this mask is. And I can change this if I want to. I could change it with all the tools that are available to me over here. The issue when you're changing it, though, is that you really only work with blacks and whites when you're in the QuickMask mode, okay? So if I were to go and try to get a green or a light green color, notice it changes it to a gray, all right? So what is selected and what isn't selected depends on what you're painting, black or white or variations of gray there in between, right? So if I were to go and get, let's say, my brush tool, and I were to start painting with black here, and I paint it all around the edge here, and then I go back out of QuickMask mode, I notice, oh, I made a selection that looked like that paint stroke. I could jump back into it and adjust my paint stroke by painting white, and I can erase some of my areas if I want to, right? So I can make these selections with my QuickMask mode, jumping in and out and make selections. I'm gonna hit Command D or deselect. Now this comes in handy because in other ways too. So let's say I get my quick selection tool here and I select kind of the purple area of this surfboard, and then I go over here and I select this purple area of the surfboard, and I select these areas of the surfboard. Oh, I'm going to hold Option and deselect these areas of the surfboard. And I got a pretty good selection here, but I noticed that maybe I didn't get perfect. There's some areas in here that weren't great. And boy, it would take a while to come in with my lasso tool or some of these other tools to make those selections. In particular, maybe even some of these areas right here where it was really black and things like that, right? So if I wanted to come into my quick mask mode, I could look at this a little bit differently and say, oh, you know what? I want to eliminate this from my selection, so I can just get my paintbrush tool here. I can paint with black. I'm going to get a nice, I'm holding Option and Control down to get a really hard edged brush, or maybe a little bit softer. Get a little bit smaller here, a little bit smaller brush, and now I'm going to paint this in and paint that part of my selection in. And I'm using my paintbrush to paint that in. And if there was motion blur, I could get a really soft edge brush. So if there was something in motion that had a lot of motion blur, I could get rid of that. I can paint this. Now individually, just go in here and say, all right, let's eliminate this from the selection. I can eliminate this from the selection. And one of the things that I really like too is, let's say that I needed to paint these lines on this surfboard. These, what is that? Maybe the cord that holds the board on, right? So I could get my paintbrush and I could try to paint that line, but boy, I'm not very good at drawing a straight line. But what I could do, if you remember with your paintbrush, if you click while you're holding Shift with the paintbrush, and you keep Shift held down, and you click somewhere else, it's going to create a straight line. So as long as I have my brush the right size, I can hold shift and kind of select these chords and make those my selection. I can select, I hold shift, click, 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 and get these in my selection. So you could see how this becomes a very powerful tool of making these selections. If I wanted to select and add what isn't and wasn't, I can jump back and forth as many times as I want in and out of QuickMask to make those selections. Just remember, using white, black and white allows you to select or not select. I might need to go in here and adjust this as well. Taking a look at this and maybe getting my either eraser tool or my brush with white and getting rid of some of these areas too, right? If I wanted to make sure it was just those purple areas of the boards. And remember also, like I said, soft edge. If there was motion blur on this arm, I could get a nice soft edged brush and maybe make that really nice soft edge if I wanted to make that selection like that, and then jump back and jump in and out of quick mask mode. So that is quick mask mode, and making selections with all the tools inside of Photoshop, just using variations of white and black, jumping in and out of quick mask mode.